Got it. I'm
Okay.
gonna pray for no bugs.
No bugs
Last week there
today.
was
That's right. How are you?
good. Tuesday and freezing.
It is
And
cold.
Halloween.
It is.
Halloween.
It is Halloween. That's so crazy.
Did you dress up as yourself?
I guess I did.
Me too.
Oh, okay. Well, anything top of mind 911. Last week we started with our 911 and that was kind of where we landed. Anything top of mind 911 today?
No.
Okay. That's great.
I was trying to think because I was thinking last week was 911. Was the week before that also, or did we skip a week? I couldn't remember. That's what I was like thinking hard on.
So the last two times, just as a recap for you, 2 times ago, we really talked more about, last time we talked about getting the meeting with Brandon, the critical staffing 911, right? And then the week before that, let me look here to remember what we talked about. Because I have our notes here, but oh, here it is. Yeah, so you talked about that was last time. I'm sorry. The time before that, what did we talk about? No, I feel like we talked about you were going to ask Allison for feedback and you were talking about boundaries and with Amanda. And then the time after that was when it was kind of a follow-up of that, but it was more we kind of moved into like, should I say this job or not? Because you kind of used the word like stuck.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
great.
Okay, so you're I know you've already updated me offline about your conversation with Brandon that was part of your homework. And I know that you just continue to work on holding your boundaries and with the for backup. And then you did talk about reviewing the division of labor and maybe even the other thing you talked about doing was you were getting ready to go last week to that dinner with all the directors and you had talked about maybe mentioning to, I can't remember her name. Ginger. Yeah. You talked about, meeting or talking to her about meeting and about potentially putting in for her job. So all of that is stuff we can check in on, or, I mean, I know some of the updates because we talked offline, but maybe even a better question is, what do you want to focus on today? Any of that stuff or any even of your development plan, which is just to remind you kind of creating better processes and systems, growing in emotional intelligence, and then considering changing jobs. So where would you like to go?
Yeah. So many choices. I guess we could do development plan stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, anything you want. What would be helpful to you today?
I think, I don't want to spend all of our time just on all of our like current work drama. So maybe doing more of the development plan.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Is there one area of particular interest to you today?
I mean, all of it. What number session are we on?
This is technically 9.
Okay.
I think it's 14 or 13.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask you, am I supposed to, I know at the very beginning we talked about how I'm supposed to be updating my boss on my development plan. I've yet to do that. That still probably needs to happen.
Okay.
Right? That we like I need to probably tell her like, hey, just so you know what we're working on. I did tell her that I was talking to you. She called me and asked me to do safety. So I did that this morning. So good.
Yeah.
But like she had to, but yeah. So I think maybe like just, I don't know what I'm supposed to really, what would be helpful?
Why don't I send you the first two aspects of your development plan in like an email. And then you could sit and have a conversation with her, and we can practice that conversation if you'd like to, or kind of just, if I can share with you how I think it might go, if you
Okay.
want some guidance. I think the key thing is that you want to be able to communicate to her, like if you're talking to Amanda and you say, one of my goals is to really create better processes and systems. I'm really trying to consider, based on what your role is and my role is, and maybe even Allison's role. Is that her name, right? Allison, yeah. What am I supposed to, we did this delegation thing where we split out our roles, and I recognize that, I really need to concentrate on the things that are on my list, but also like how to prioritize those things in critical staffing, how to delegate certain things that maybe I don't have to be the one doing, how to make sure I'm effectively, communicating. And, your goal in that really is for you to feel more balanced and in control within your role, because you don't currently feel that way. And so that would be kind of how you would work on explaining that one.
Okay.
And I think too, just being able to say, I really do crave and love routine and order and structure, but I want to have room for flexibility because obviously our current world demands that,
Right.
And then I think the second one was I want to really grow in emotional intelligence. And I think you would share there, I some of the feedback I received from my 360, is that I probably am not always aware of how I am coming across. And or if I am aware, I'm not always willing to manage it, because that's probably true too. Sometimes, like, I'm aware that I'm coming across this way, but I just got to get through it. Right. So being more aware and being able to manage that better. And then also being aware of the tone and tenor of others and being able to meet them in their needs, emotionally, as I'm going. Again, it's not a check off actionable, like specific thing, like writing fluffy letters like we talked about, but how do I do that better? So I think those things are things that you could share with her.
Okay.
And you could probably ask for feedback on those. Do you feel like those are good, good objectives? And when you ask for feedback like that, remember that you might get more than you bargained for. Like there might be like a piling on feeling, like, oh yeah, you really need that. Or I don't, like, oh, I'm glad you're working on that. Try to give it to her, ask for feedback, and don't respond. Just collect the feedback, say thanks for your input, and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
I think that getting into that there, based on how I know you feel about her, or maybe even just like if you lack respect for her perspective on those things, your tendency might be to kind of rally back, and probably not a helpful tool for you, because it, as you've kind of said, like it doesn't really make a difference. So
Right.
So
good.
Collect
feedback, stay quiet.
So good. Yeah. So I think that would be a helpful thing to do.
Yeah. Great.
So of the 3 development plan goals that you have, though, that was them. And then the third one, of course, is considering changing jobs. Where do you feel the most need or desire to talk about today?
I think 2 things come from that. Like, so coming out of the Brandon meeting, which then was our staff meeting, which then led into now we need something to actually implement, right? So it was like Brandon was able to provide me with some of the answers or the direction and responses I needed to be able to have staff meeting. And staff meeting was a place to be able to communicate that, of like on a broader level. And so now I think we have to like roll out the action plan. And so that is going to have to go to everybody in the system as well as like my team. And so I guess part of the kind of processes and systems, while I would love to have processes and systems once we're like full staff, like what do things look like? That's like, pie in the sky. So it's like I need processes and systems now with them before the big rollout, which is basically going to be telling the big hospital like what we can and cannot do and how that's going to look. So that's one. And then two is from the dinner last week, talking to Ginger and hearing that her retirement, like she's retiring in January, and that they will be posting her position, and her asking me to go ahead and send my resume to her, needing to put that on my list of to-dos of like updating my resume since the last time that's been done. So, and I think the plan with that is like go ahead and do some updates, because I think I need to make it more targeted towards the position, and then review, just because I haven't really spelt out all my leadership managerial. Like before, it was more of like clinical dietitian, yes, for applying for this position, but it wasn't like I had to do a ton. And now I feel like I need to list what I've done the past 4 or 5 years. Not, but just speak to it and apply for this position. So that doesn't really give you a lot of answers other than I guess my process is yeah, go ahead.
No, I just said that's helpful. Well, it sounds like there's not probably anything necessarily for us to dig into with the job application on here for coaching, although I would love to hear how you're feeling about that. Like, does it excite you? Does it kind of just like, or is it like negative even? Like, what's the feeling or sentiment for you?
Yeah. So I think I used to be more excited for the position. I just know that St. Jude has excellent benefits compared to lots of places, including Le Bonheur. Like their benefits are just amazing. And because my mom worked there growing up, like we had her benefits. Like I just know what all my medical stuff looks like with that insurance and that kind of stuff. I am less excited about it being an in-person 5 days a week downtown kind of thing. I like the more hybrid opportunities, especially as I see like the need for that with Riley. And then because I have a lot more insight to the department, having just transitioned one of our lead dietitians in there, there's always going to be stuff, right? And that's in all departments. I think whether I'm hybrid or not, their department structure has changed some, and that they have this interim director and they have 2 lead/managers, which is super interesting. So they only have 12 dietitians. So they basically have more leadership staff than we do for, the 28 dietitians that we have. Like Ginger and director, and then usually there are 2 lead managers, and there's another educational specialist, somebody. So Ginger's now, she's still in her director position, but there's an interim director, and then there's still those other 3. Which it sounds like they're doing a lot.
There's Ginger, interim director, 3 leads, and then 12 dietitians, you said?
Well, there's 2 leads and an education specialist, which is a type of lead. So yes, I guess we could say 3 leads. Yeah, and 12 dietitians.
Okay, got it.
So, and it kind of just sounds like, I don't know. I think it would be okay. I think what I want in a position is more flexibility, better benefits, and pay. And so I guess the question is, like, I'm willing to interview and hear more about it, to hear about, like, could the better benefits and pay what, like we talked about before, give me some leverage to feel like I have more flexibility because I'm able to outsource things that when I am home, I'm not feeling like I need to do all these other things.
Right.
I'd be able to have that feeling versus right now, I feel like I need the hybrid because that gives me some time back to be able to do things that I'm not like outsourcing.
Yeah.
So there's that, but then there's also the thought, from what I hear, Ginger sounds very pro an outside applicant coming in to take the position, but it sounds like the department is very much okay with this person who's in this interim position taking the director position.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, well, that makes sense to me too. Like, I feel like I've been successful in my role because I've worked here for a while. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? There's sometimes where you're like, yeah, you don't want that person like moving into that. But there's a lot of things about it that if you understand the organization, you have those relationships and networks, and that it makes sense. So I'm a little bit like, I don't know, and I guess indifferent to that maybe. I mean, I think so I wouldn't say I'm like so excited, but it's an opportunity that I've considered for the past, 5-10 years thinking. But I think the reason that like I was considering it was more before the opportunity, but before COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like before the opportunity for hybrid positions and that sort of thing was even a thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, what I hear is that it's worth kind of shooting your shot, because it'll give you, well, one, it'll clean up your resume and prepare you for any other options that may come. Two, you have a specific kind of knowing Ginger, so it gives you some sort of leverage that we should use in our networking. And that you don't, you're not committing to anything. By being in the process, you get to explore. And I think too, just to remind you, as you're talking about one of the things that's valuable to you, it could be more money and benefits, but also the whole hybrid thing could, as a director, you may have leverage to make some of those changes. And so just getting in there to kind of explore, because it's one of those question marks for you because you feel stuck now. So it's a step forward towards something that isn't a waste of your time per se,
Yeah.
So I like the idea. So I think we can come back to this at the end, but it sounds like some homework would be to get your resume dusted off and sent over for editing and review. I think that would be a good step. And so,
start.
Yeah. Okay.
Agree.
Okay, good. Okay. So the other thing that you talked about, was, you've had this Brandon meeting, you've had this staff meeting. And so I want to go into we can talk about the action plan. And the other thing that I want to be mindful of, so we can do that today, if that's helpful for you. And then I want to be mindful of your emotional intelligence piece, because it'll never feel like the fire to you.
Yeah.
And so, and yet I think a lot of the process and systems things comes naturally to you. You just can't do what you want to do right now because, in critical staffing, like you just said, like you can't, the pie in the sky thing is really what you want to get at. And you have expressed the need for balance and control. That's a very important thing. And so we need to talk through that because I feel like you're on the cusp of, creating at least some more balance and control in the current environment, because it is what it is, but you're trying, you're holding your boundaries, you're getting alignment with Allison, you're getting you're taking steps in that, which is great. So I think we work on that today, if that's helpful for you. And then I think, making a plan to talk about emotional intelligence too, which could look like homework. I could give you an assessment that we could come back and plan to talk about too.
Yeah. Well, and really, as you were saying that, I thought you were going to say too, which is maybe even what the emotional intelligence piece could be, the piece that I need help with in the deliverance of this is how we're actually going to do it, right? It's like, do I really need help creating the how we're going to do it? Probably not. I mean, I love to do everything in a group. I love group assignments. I think that's just like so I'm like, I would love to tell you all about it and so we could work on it together, but I don't know that I need help as much as that's fun versus like, okay, so it comes time to deliver it. That is equally as important as the development. And I haven't always placed that as the importance. Like I've always been like, okay, this is my job to create it. And now this is my way of communicating it. I need you to receive it with a smile and ask me questions because I've asked you to ask me questions if there's, and really it's like, okay, how do I? So maybe we could start. I mean, I would love to do the homework and assessment thing, but maybe we need to talk through like, okay, so create the actual nitty gritty, like how we're going to do this. And then what, like what's the ideal way to deliver it?
I like that. Okay. So then what I'm hearing you say, is, oops, sorry. There we go. Do you have, a general outline about the action plan? Can you give me an update on that so that we could kind of then talk through?
Yes, I'm going to pull up my email too. So Amanda and I spoke yesterday.
Okay.
And really kind of came together and reviewed the staffing model that I reviewed in staff meeting that she wasn't at. And she, I think, is being held a little bit more accountable to Brandon. And so she's feeling like she needs to like give some of this to him. So we just took my PowerPoint from staff meeting and consolidated a couple of the slides to be able to get them. And he's going to be the one to like help get it out to all the departments. And it'll be like
share it with him.
Did I share it with him?
Or did she share it? I mean, has it been shared with Brandon?
He did, yes.
Okay.
So we, which is, I mean, kind of typical of what happens. We also I was off Thursday, Friday. So last Wednesday after staff meeting, her and I developed a needs assessment. So basically like, where are we totally lacking the appropriate education and knowledge to be able to serve certain teams really well, right? So it's like some of our transplants, while we could provide a general pediatric evaluation and support some of their critical care needs if they're in an ICU, the dietitians we have are not specialized in some of the certain transplants. And so our communication to the department heads needs to be, we're happy to continue to provide these pediatric nutrition assessments and help your kids grow, but these dietitians are not specialized in this and can't give you all like the nitty gritty, oh, this medication is going to affect this and you're going to need more of that. And because we can't expect our dietitians to be that specialized in like 5 areas right now. So it's like, hey, we're able to give you this level of, and we have younger staff right now. So it's like, okay, so the needs assessment is like, where all do we need more training? And part of my conversation with Brandon was, when are we getting more insight to what compensation is going to be? And then also another thing that keeps our staff here is the opportunity for training and career development and education. And we haven't had budget for that, like all of Le Bonheur hasn't. And he said that he's able to pitch it to Big Methodist better. He's like, well, I know we'd love to be able to brush up on our skills and get people continuing education. We just don't have the budget for that right now. But if we're saying that there's a lack of a skill, like we don't have it, we have a better like skill. Yeah. And so that's the hope in creating for that. So that was sent last Thursday. And then yesterday, Amanda and I consolidated some of my slides. So let me see. So due to multiple current and upcoming open positions, Le Bonheur Nutrition Therapy will have to adjust staffing at this time. Once we hire and train an additional 4 dietitians, our coverage and staffing structure will be reevaluated. And that's based on that where we are now and when are we going to consider like opening
Next
up
year.
to more. And so we have 10 of our 24 positions open right now.
Whew.
10 of our 24. So at what point do I feel comfortable reevaluating? I was like, if we can get 4 of those filled and only have 6 open, that would be where we are. And that's, so I need to communicate that to our staff too, because they'll get the questions too, like, oh, when can y'all start covering this clinic? Or when can you start coming over here? Or when can I send this patient to you? And it can be a very clear, like, hey, we've already been told once we have 4 dietitians, and it's not just hired, it's hired and trained, which if we hired 4 dietitians today, it would probably be 6 months from now before we can even consider it. Okay.
Last question.
Yeah.
Did you say we have 10 of our 24 positions open, or we only have them 10 filled?
And are open. So
Okay.
we have 14 filled. Right.
And I like the idea of giving them metrics, not only just 4 new dietitians hired, but also trained, and training takes 6 months, giving them time, like actual time too. I like that you've done that. That's a really great job, Michelle.
And then I wanted a start date. Like I feel like we need, like, when is the start date? So if we implement this plan and it's going to start November 6th, which is Monday. Okay. Why won't this advance? Oh, there we go. Okay. And like, you really want me to, so there's just 3 slides. I already went over the first one. The second one is we're going to decrease our outpatient dietitian services during critical staffing. And so there's clinics that we were previously already covering that we no longer can cover. And there's clinics that they wanted a dietitian that they still haven't gotten approval for a dietitian. So obviously the ones that have never gotten approval, we still are not covering. But the ones that we were covering are a GI specialty clinic and liver transplant, cardiology, transplant, and a high risk clinic, our muscular dystrophy clinic, and any additional neuro, a nephrology clinic, an aerodigestive clinic, and an infant, toddler, and feeding clinic. And all of that, we're asking them, instead of dietitians covering those clinics, to send messages to like a message pool in our electronic system. And 2 of the dietitians that we're quote unquote losing are going to stay on to do some PRN answering some of those messages. So it's still going to provide a service to them that is mandated by some regulatory measures of like having a dietitian. But what it's not doing is we can no longer charge for these services because we have to see them in person to charge. And it's better practice to see our patients in person and to collaborate with the teams, but we're just not going to physically be able to do that. So this is a way to continue to provide nutrition support to these physicians versus like one-on-one nutrition care. Because usually the physicians can call and say, hey, they've lost weight, or like they're not eating well. Can you figure out what we need to do? You know, so it's not like they're totally blinded. So anyways, and then, yeah.
I was coughing, sorry.
So, also, which I don't really know if she has to say a separate point, but we have our endocrine clinic that we cover all new onset diabetes, inpatient and outpatient. Sometimes they admit them, sometimes they don't. And so we're prioritizing that education over any other like one-on-one endocrine trainings. And those are going to also go to a message pool.
So you'll only serve new diabetes patients only in that clinic. Great.
Yes. Which this is kind of crazy. Some patients come to the emergency room, they'll give them an insulin shot, send them home, let them sleep in their own bed, and have them come back to clinic the next day, and they do all their education in clinic,
Wow.
which is crazy because like when I was diagnosed and when all these other kids, they're hospitalized for like several days with the education. So, but yes, it's for both of those, new onset, inpatient and outpatient.
Okay, that's great.
And then, so that's outpatient. Now, inpatient services, typically our dietitians round every day with the team, or well, I would say 4 days a week they round. And now we're going to decrease to 2 days per week, which is a pro and con in that really helpful when you round every day because you can just get stuff done on rounds and like you can report stuff, you can get orders changed, but it also is like a significant part of time. Like some of the teams round for 4. So like 8 to 12, you're rounding, like how are you going to see? So like that will buy back some time, but you also can learn a lot on rounds. Like you just learn because it's a multidisciplinary. So it's like everybody's there rounding on the patient. So anyway, decreasing to 2 times a week. And then we're going to prioritize discharging patients. So like any of our discharge educations that need to happen, our consults, and then screens, which are basically a nurse assessment that if they fail so many things, it like flags them to us. So that's going to be their prioritization. But what I like, part of my process is I need to figure out is, okay, like what am I responsible for as one of the NICU dietitians? You know, like am I responsible for discharge educations within my responsibility and consults and screens, or does my bubble need to open up to encompass more than just my NICU? And if it does, am I individualizing each person? So like, this is what I want you to be in charge of, or am I putting them in more groups, which is what I kind of did before. So it's like, hey, address your piece, but then as a group, this is you're collectively going to have this additional. And, you know, one day you might be a little bit more busy. And so then that's up to y'all to communicate to figure out who's taking this piece and then also be able to collaborate, and heaven forbid one of them sick. Like there's just a little bit more than individual.
For you, what are the pros and cons there in that decision? Like, or not for you. I mean, what are the pros and cons?
Like what can I think of as pros and cons? So I think it might be a little easier to say, it's a little bit more black and white to say, this is what you're in charge of, and here's the extra piece. Whereas like it's a little bit more gray when you say, take these 3 people, you all have your own base floor, and here's what's going to be added, and y'all figure it out. And to me, I want to be able to do that. I think that would be better for them. But sometimes I feel like they need more of the black and white. Like they need, and we've kind of had to go back and forth. Like, okay, so you need an additional 10 beds. I'm giving you room 1 to 10 on this floor. That's your extra. And then it's not like, oh, I didn't know, or I couldn't figure out, you know, it's just, so pro is sometimes the black and white is better than giving this like ambiguity. But then in that ambiguity of like, hey, this is the additional, y'all figure it out, it does give them the flexibility. It's like, hey, I have 2 really complicated patients. There's no way I can get to this. And you just had half of your floor discharge. Can we communicate and figure out who is ideal? So it's better for the patients that way because they're going to get the attention that they need versus somebody that's like, okay, well, I have 2 complicated patients, but I have these extra 10 rooms. I got to figure out how to get it done. And there's a potential that they wouldn't be able to give the time that's needed. So other pros and cons. And then I think also like cross training a little bit, that helps. Like you kind of end up learning more than just your bubble and your additional piece. Like you kind of have that mentoring teamwork, which we need anyways. And that's probably how we end up breaking it up a little bit more, like have somebody that's a little bit more senior, hopefully within each little bubble, not just have like a bunch of new people. And I can look at, well, either way, I guess I could look at workload and figure out how to split that up. Was that enough pros and cons?
Yeah. So what I hear is the things that you're trying to take into consideration, you said cross training, which I think is obviously important for the flux of staff you may have out that day for PTO or anything else. But also you're thinking, you continue to share how you have a young team. And so training them, you've talked about giving them exposure on rounding and things like that. So when you're thinking about not just coverage today, but what's the best plan long-term for education and training for these, that's one thing to be in consideration. So cross training for a daily coverage issue, training for, the long-term plan here. Those are both in tension a little bit. It sounds like one option has more of administrative load for you to have to plan and just, kind of like, or for them to talk and plan, like it takes more time to divvy that up, but provides flexibility to make sure all coverage is occurring and that the workload is evenly distributed. So as you're thinking through that, I heard you say patient care is really important, education for the team is really important, coverage is important, and just and managing the workload. I wondered too, because I didn't hear you say this, but is there a way to and maybe you're thinking about this, is there a rotation aspect that you could do in this too, or is that like to give people specialties, or like if you in that black and white area, like you give somebody a specialty and then you rotate them so they're continuing, is there a way to like that training can be engaged in both options, or even just as you hear me repeat that back to you, maybe the better question is, what is the higher need? Because they each have attention. Cross training, long-term training.
Yeah. So part of their orientation to like the nutrition therapy department is spending some time with all the services, because they have to be able to work a weekend by themselves. So that means they're covering the whole hospital by themselves. So it goes back to, you don't need to know how to do anything in super depth, because the specialized person will be in on Monday, but you need to be able to answer questions and do a consult in a general way. So you need to be able to see, like, start tube feedings on a patient in any of these settings. But as far as like, hey, we're going to color code the bubbles and everyone's going to kind of like switch a bubble every month, would be super hard, because they're the specialists be like leaving the area.
So do I hear you saying that you're really trying to get them more depth in each area too over time? Like not just that?
Yeah.
Okay. And so in the model that you talked about, where you're assigning them black and white, an area of responsibility, and then you're giving, and then the rest is flex. Is there potential for them to hold that area of responsibility for 30 to 60, I don't know, 2 months, and then rotate that so that they have depth there, but then they get depth somewhere else? Or is it more valuable to you that 2 people have depth there and they can cover each other? What's the highest need?
Yeah.
Right now in critical,
I guess in both situations, they all have their kind of primary responsibility, and it would be like what is being added, which is, so what the part that's being added. So if you're still keeping your primary, you're going to get in more depth there, and then you're getting this little side piece, or you're keeping your primary, like you're in a group of 3 that everyone's keeping their primary, but instead of it being 10 beds, like the 30 beds are going to be shared or something. So are you saying that the PC?
I don't know that I have an answer. I don't know, because I don't know how it works. I was just wanting to consider, and I think, because I think, one of the things that you've said, it's important for you to communicate this very clearly. Right. And when you communicate it, you'll want to do so with certainty, so that because you're going to want to feel certain, was what I mean, because you're going to get people that you're not going to please everyone when you do this.
Right.
So you have to be sure, but also want to be, this is where you're talking about like the empathetic part of it and understanding that this might mean like, because if you've thought down the line, oh, I'm going to announce this, and I know Susie's not going to be really pleased with this. You don't have to target Susie, but you can think, what are Susie's complaints? Okay, they're going to be that she doesn't get exposure to other areas, or she really likes doing this and I've taken that away. And so being able to say, when you know, hey guys, I'm getting ready to communicate out to you your responsibilities. This isn't written in stone forever, but we're going to give this a try for 90 days. And I want your feedback, but let's live with it for 30 days and collect that feedback. And, you know, of course you're welcome to share it along the way, but let's have a session where we get back together and talk about how this is going.
Yeah.
But also be able to say, and I recognize for some of you, when you hear your assignments, you may not have gotten something that you really enjoy, or you may have some areas that are added that you don't, you know, appreciate. And so while I do want I do want to consider that, know that we're going to rotate or that we have flexibility, but let's live with this. And I really want your best feedback or something. But my point is that you want to be certain. And so I'm just trying to ask some questions to say, do you feel like you know in your gut which way is the better way to go? Because when you're holding that cross training, long-term training, coverage, you know, versus easy to dispatch and, you know, administratively, like what, you know, do you feel like you have an instinct on what would, and also what the team will want to do, because you want their energy behind this too. It should feel like a win in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the groups is what I think would be most beneficial to patients and the team. And I think they are at the point now with our staff that they have had the most buy-in to this plan versus like a couple of years ago when we tried to do this. Like, I think they're more into the plan. I do think that it does cause more just, I don't know, anxiety, hesitation, just because it's not black and white, and dietitians can like black and white. So I think there is, which is also why it's important that even like making this list of pros, sometimes that's where I can lack some of the like, okay, I guess when I deliver this, I need to go through all of this, when I just can appreciate like that I've worked with all of them for some time, and I wish they would just like know that that's what, like, I've considered that, right? And so, but I get that it needs to be
that's great,
thought
Michelle.
through.
Yeah. You like to cheer when you have wins, right? Woo! Remember?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so I love that. I love what you just said was, I really do feel like the best option is these groups. You know, and I think there's most buy-in, which is great. And I think it gives the patients and the teams the, you know, the most benefit. That's awesome. So I think you've come up with that. Like, I feel that's good. And then what you said, though, what you went on to say was, and I know now I'm starting to hear that I need to communicate this, not just say this is the edict, but let me open up the curtain and show them transparently how I came to this decision. Not so that they can argue it, but so that they understand that, like, yes, I have considered, you know, these things that are really important to you, and even being able to say that. Guys, you know, there's not a perfect way through this, but I have really tried to sit down and communicate and think through what you guys have the most energy for, what benefits you the most in training, and what benefits, you know, and being able to kind of share with them why those whys. I think that's so good, Michelle. Great job.
Okay, great.
Okay,
so two.
Okay.
The other parts of it were where we can cut back. So like, if we're going to be adding something, if you ever say add anything, it's already like, oh my gosh, like, well, I'm already full doing what I'm doing. How are you going to add something? So it's decreasing other things. So typically, if there's this nursing screen that's failed, that they get flagged, they're required to do an assessment on these patients. But there's some of those flags that are not really that high acuity or high priority. So like if you get a nutrition flag for a kid that's coming in for a dental procedure or like tonsils and adenoids getting taken out, but they have a G-tube already, like we're going to get flagged to need to do a full assessment, but they're only going to be there for 48 hours for their surgery. And if they're doing well with their like G-tube plan, I think you froze.
You did. Yeah, you're frozen for me.
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Oh, now
you're very, oh, there we go. Then we could just verify, hey, kids on the same Q-feed plan that they were on at home. They're just here for a dental procedure and to be watched. We're not doing a full assessment. That can be done next time they're outpatient and then giving the team, like the physicians, the opportunity, hey, if you have a nutrition concern, you can consult us specifically, but we're not going to be seeing your kids that are getting their tonsils and adenoids taken out just because they have a G-tube. In the past, we would have done that. So our consult, the same thing, like we get consulted from a physician on a patient, do the consult, and then every 7 days, so weekly, we see all the patients, and write another full note, which is so lengthy. And so we're going to say that if there's no changes being made, they're going to put this blurb in I'm going to write, and it's going to be like it just says basically refer to this date. This patient has been reviewed. There's no change in our current recommendation and intervention, and then move on to the next patient. Don't feel like you have to write out the whole, like, this is what their weight's doing, these are their labs. There's no change. We're just going to say no change and move on. So that's going to save a lot of time. And then, if the physician needs a discharge education or something to be addressed that day, we're asking that's communicated on rounds, which will only be in twice a week, or by noon. So that with the additional things that they're doing, they're able to prioritize their afternoon, and they don't feel like they're continuing to get these like emergencies all afternoon. Their day is just like, it's like, okay, by noon I can prioritize what the rest of my afternoon is going to look like. And if anything else comes down that needs to be done, they have permission to say, I will not be able to get to that until tomorrow. And then the team can make the decision what they want to do. / they could also say, you can call me, like call my boss, because I'm happy to say that. Because a lot of them get nervous to say stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, please send them to me. So those are the ways that we're going to decrease their current responsibility to give them the room to be able to do this added something.
Michelle, that's a really impressive plan so far. I mean, there might be more. I'm just like,
yeah, no, that's it. I was like making sure.
Okay. How do you feel about that work?
I will feel better about it after it's implemented how intended.
How what?
Like how intended. Like I feel like I can go over it, I can roll it out, and there's always like something that happens or like some questions that come back from the team that then get directed to Amanda, and Amanda doesn't have a great understanding of how to implement it, and then it gets changed, and then there's confusion because some people they're writing a full note when there's not an intervention that changes, and there's stuff like that. I'm like, it all like felt like it could work well. And unless like I'm in it all the time, I just feel like there's so many opportunities for it to like not go well.
When will this be communicated?
This week. I mean, that's what I need to figure out. What is today? Tuesday?
Who's responsible for communicating it to your team?
Communicated to the big people?
No, your team.
Yeah, ideally, I would say it needs to be communicated tomorrow. We typically have Wednesday staff meetings, or no, we don't. We have Wednesday 12 to 1 education or staff meeting or whatever. So we have one of the dietitians that's leaving the next week giving an update on like, this is all the protocols and guidelines for heart transplant. And this is all so I could, at the end of that, go through this with the goal of then it being communicated to like the whole hospital on Thursday, so that they have like Thursday and Friday if this is going to be implemented on Monday.
So are you concerned that the whole hospital won't follow the guidelines, or like once it's rolled out, or your team?
My team.
And that's because they just won't feel comfortable changing, or they won't remember the details, or what?
Yeah, or they'll make up their own version of, oh, like this is the part I chose that I wanted to do, or not, like, this is the part I liked about it, or I had a question about it and then I asked somebody like Amanda who couldn't explain it clearly. And then what's been hard for me is, okay, so someone decides to like not do part of it. I need to be involved enough that I can correct that, but there's 20, well, now there's 14 of them, but I don't ever feel like my hand is in it enough until somebody else tells me that they haven't been following it. And by then it's like, well, then 3 of them aren't doing this. Or there's, yeah. So it's like, I feel like I need to figure out more of like, how do I make sure it's happening before it feels like it's been changed, you know? Does that make sense? Like, what is my follow-up to know that this is actually what's happening? Or am I just going to hear, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, there's so much to do. And it's like, well, are you doing X, Y, Z? Or are you still doing it the old way? And if you're doing it the old way, then yeah, you're going to be here at 8 o'clock at night. Again, emotional intelligence, but.
That's right. What do you think, when you implement change, and think about like a change, like if I were going to implement a change in your life or your workflow, that's a very ingrained in you, right? Or like these patterns and habits and responsibilities are ingrained in you. What do you feel like would be most helpful for you on a day-to-day basis to make sure that you have easy reminders and access to this information?
Like to have a copy of it, to make sure we keep on going over it.
Great, yeah.
Maybe like peer checking, like
okay.
We have our huddles, like we have 2 o'clock huddles, like going over it again, like how are people doing this well? How is it like going? Who's been successful in an area that they can share about something they've done?
I love that.
So got all these.
you got them all inside you. You just did them all. Yeah, and just I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like putting it in front of them, and remembering that people aren't going to read lengthy things, right? So your PowerPoint and visuals, things like that they can open up and reference, hanging it in a common area, like visuals, like maybe it's even just one for each new change or something like that. And then I don't remember how many changes there were, but you said your huddles, like maybe it's like, hey, today we're going to review the change related to this area. Who can tell me whatever? And I mean, shoot, give them a $5 Starbucks gift card or something.
Yeah.
Like make it fun and engaging. And I think you're right, daily until the change is implemented, it takes repetition. And also reminding them of the why, like, guys, remember to do this because doing this is going to ease your load and help you, keeping the why ever in front of them in those huddles. And the peer checking is a great idea too. And I don't know if you're putting them in groups, encourage, I don't know the whole workflow, but like encouraging them, hey, check in with your group each morning and make sure everybody's got their stuff, settled or whatever. But yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Visual and
like crossover. So it's like a patient might get transferred to another floor that might be outside of your group. And so there's peer checking in that, or you'd be like, hey, they transferred to me, but I saw that you wrote another note and you didn't have to, you could have just whatever. So there's some of that, but so one thing I was going to ask you, so like our huddles, technically Allison leads our huddle. So I don't have to be there all the time. So I can have another 2 o'clock meeting and I don't have to be physically there. When I'm physically on campus and I can be there, I am, but I don't lead it. Now, if I'm there, like physically, she still will lead it, but then she always looks to me to be like, hey, what else, do we need to, and then bring up something like this if I was there, like, hey, let's check in about this. So part of me is like, while I love to delegate, I just don't know that things always happen, you know? So it's like, I can explain this to Allison, which she has been part of some of this planning, not a ton, because she's covering a million other things. It's like, I feel like it's hard for her to lead something that she hasn't really been part of creating. So it's like, maybe I do need to be there. And that might be my answer to the question. Like, I just need to be there for a while to make sure that this is getting, and by be there, I mean, I can call in or whatever, but
I think that's a great, I think you're right. Your presence is probably, I think your instinct there is right. I mean, if Allison is a lead and she's giving some leadership, or she's, it might be worth your while to spend a few minutes and go over this with her, but outside of the group.
Yeah.
Let her buy in, let her know it's coming. Tell her you're like what you really want to see in that 2:00 meeting, demonstrate it a couple of times. And but then also, what about, you talk about a lot about like delegating out to the team. Could you assign one of these like reminders, like, hey guys, I'm gonna pick a name out of the hat for tomorrow, and I want that person to go over this new change, or I don't know, just utilizing them and saying, hey, Samantha, I want you to review what we do if this happens. Like, give them a scenario or something. I don't know. Would they be open to doing that in Huddle?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. Just
I can ask Allison too. Like, here's some ideas of ways we could go over it in Huddle. With, is there one that you prefer right now, or do you feel like it's better to give her some, like, if she doesn't want to be the one to go over it, or if she wants me to be there for a little while and then we progress to draw out of it, or just that like maybe.
And coming up with different ways, I think, is a great, like, mixing it up, having her do it, having you do it, drawing a name of the hat, gift card. I mean, just kind of making it like clear to them, like, hey guys, and this is the new norm until we hire and train 4 new staff. Then we need to like adopt this so that we can all have a good work-life balance, provide quality patient care. And if we step outside the lines of this, the other thing that happens is we are creating a habit with a physician, for example, that it's allowable with me, that you can blur the line, and then it creeps right back on. And so remember the why. So I like all your ideas of review it, give them a copy of it, peer checking, using those huddles, getting Allison's buy-in, delegate to the team, whatever, make it fun, whatever.
Okay. It's 10:30.
Okay. What'd you say?
I don't have to go.
Oh.
You have to go. It's 10:30.
Well, let's close with this. Let me ask you, how do you feel about, I mean, we didn't get to the whole, like, how am I going to say it and roll it out, but you really said it yourself, that I need to be more transparent and communicative when I do it. How do you feel about that?
I feel good about it. I feel like because we talked it through, that makes sense. Sometimes I feel like the reasons I don't are because I don't want to waste people's time. Like, I consider it, and I feel such a lack of time for all of us. That's like, just communicate what needs to be communicated. Don't give all this extra, like, that's my responsibility to get it done. Like, sometimes I don't want to hear about all their like lengthy 5-hour patient plans. Like, I just need to know what you're doing. And so as I go through this, it's like, that is helpful. And it doesn't feel so sappy like I've seen other things presented. Like, it feels very like, okay, this is the important meat of that extra stuff, versus like, I don't have to tell a whole story about a tree and leaves falling off of it and why this is, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be that elaborate. It can be like, this is more of my thought process behind it, and I want to be transparent about those things.
There's times when taking the time isn't a waste of time. In fact, it'll probably save you a lot of time in the long run.
I've just not seen that. I've never seen that demonstrated or like that. So like, I haven't taken time, so it's like just a new thing to exercise and feel.
I want to hear how it goes. And if you're working on it in the next 24 hours and you're like, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk about how I'd say these things? I mean, just hit me up. It's fine. I'm around. So okay, so how do you feel about today? Do you feel like that was helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent.
I'm really, really super impressed. Like, I mean, with all sincerity, like you kind of started this, even just coaching. We started and like, it feels chaotic, like, and I'm stuck. But what I see you doing is creating a way where there is no way, so to speak. You're like, you're finding ways to be unstuck where you are in really creative ways. Like we just talked about creating a critical staffing plan last week, and you've got it and you're rolling it out, and you'll get feedback and iterate on it, I'm sure. It might not be perfect, but you're moving. And I think that's just a really commendable thing. Yes, let's celebrate. Woo. So for next week, we talked about resume dusted off. And I can send you an EQ assessment so that maybe we could focus on your development goal of emotional intelligence.
I love
You what?
assessments.
I know you
that's
do.
good.
I know you do. And then of course, I mean, really just rolling this out. It's not your homework, but I definitely want to check back in on rolling out the plan.
Yeah.
And you're welcome.
It has to happen. Homework or not.
That's right. So feel free on that one.
It's probably going to be like, my goal would be to get it done this week, but it's like, I need to get this stuff, but yes, done first.
So feel free to, you what?
I said both. I guess part of me feels like I don't feel like I can work on my resume during work time. Like I feel like that needs to be done outside of all these other things that are happening. So I just need to prioritize that in other life. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, or like, I mean, you are given a lunch, you could take an hour and just get your lunch and sit, and work on it. I mean, or something, but
yeah.
But yeah, so, and feel free to give me an update on the rolling out of the plan, prior to next week, send me a Voxer or whatever to give me an update.
Okay.
And again, if you need any kind of, you need a discussion or planning partner in the next 24 to 48 hours, just give me a call.
Okay.
I'm excited. Great
so
job.
much. Thanks. This is great. Oh, I forgot one thing. Do you have a second?
Yes.
For me to tell you?
Yeah.
In a meeting with Amanda yesterday, we got interrupted multiple times, and I was having to call other physicians back, which was kind of nerve-wracking to me, that like, what if we weren't on this call and I wasn't hearing these questions? But one of the questions I had asked her to ask Brandon, because she had a Brandon meeting yesterday, and she happened to talk to me before her Brandon meeting and just said, what are some things that we're curious about that we need to talk to Brandon about? So I was like, okay, well, I'll just give her some things. And one of them was, we used to do like quarterly lunches, and Brandon would pay for them, like just as some kind of like morale booster, culture building, team, whatever. And that's all gone away. But I was like, I don't remember him telling me to stop. I think it just kind of did stop. And so I wanted to see if we can like resume that. And she was like, there's no way, there's no money for that. And I was like, well, can we just ask? Can we just say like, hey, it's okay. Well, so she asked, and he told her, if we did something that was like not a continuing education necessarily, but like a continuing education or a team building or some kind of training, that he would sponsor like a lunch for us. And I said, oh, well, maybe I'll ask Karen Wilkie if she wants to come talk to our team. So you don't have to answer me now, but in the next so many weeks, if we could be one of your projects and you want to come talk to our team, do you have anything that you need to do for an assignment?
I'm happy to do anything. What was Amanda's reaction to that?
She's like, oh, that's a good idea.
Okay.
But I know that you're really full, so like I want to make sure it like fits in with.
I can definitely make something fit and would enjoy doing it. I think what we should talk about maybe offline is areas of interest, and maybe even, asking your team, like, what would they be interested in doing it, like a team feedback, like, would it be good, like, to do like an assessment and figure out like relationship managers or like team discovery, or would it be better to do something on emotional intelligence, stress management? What would be helpful? So let's talk through it.
Yeah. And I probably need to give them some like multiple choice, you know, like
Yeah.
what, or like, you know, bank, not just like, what do you want?
Yeah, like we could talk through some options. And then kind of see if there's something that fits. But yeah, I'd be more than happy to consider it. So, and that, so let's talk about that. And then that reminded me, your other homework thing was you were going to share your development plan with Amanda. So I'll get you a copy of those two, and then you can kind of figure out how you want to talk about it.
Yeah. That's 3 homeworks: development plan with Amanda, resume, and my EI assessment.
You got it.
And then just, you know, rolling out the stuff.
Which you're going to do anyway, and you're just going to share the update.
Yeah.
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 Perfect.
Thanks.
Hey, great
Awesome.
job,
Thank you
Michelle.
so much. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Bye.